Hey, good morning and welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I am Charlie Paparelli. And this is a show for entrepreneurs about entrepreneurs. And what I've learned is that entrepreneurs, the ones that I've talked to, have great ideas how to start companies and to build them into very valuable enterprises. And we're going to have an entrepreneur today who's going to talk about that and has some terrific long-term experience, which is rare in today's environment. It seems like most of us are looking for those 3 years and out. But if you don't want to miss one of these episodes, I recommend that you you subscribe at paparelli.com. Just go to paparelli.com and submit your email. You'll get not only alerted as to when these interviews come out, but you'll also get my blog. So my guest today is Wendy Salle, and she is the founder of a retail store called Salle Opticians. Wendy is this was a physical store, a storefront retailer, and I think she's extraordinary in the kind of business that she built. And as you can tell, I'm probably one of her customers and have been for 20 years. She recently sold her business after 34 years in the luxury, in the high-end optical space. She sold it to a company called Luxury Optical Holdings, where she serves today as their chief merchant. In fact, she's going to be talking to us from New York. You heard it right when I said she's been in business for 34 years. That's very unusual to be able to continue to build a business, to continue to keep the values of the business stable, and to keep a loyal customer base and a growing customer base going forward. And she's done that. I met Wendy after doing business with her store, and it's currently located in Phipps Plaza in Atlanta. Phipps Plaza was developed as a high-end mall with high-end brands. Salle Opticians is a high-end optical retailer, and I see it in a sea of low-end optical retailers and also competition with optometry doctors' offices who pretty much do the same. In such a hellishly crowded market, Wendy established this fantastic long-term profitable business. She also has the long-term employees as part of this success, which I really want to dig into. I want to interview Wendy because she always struck me as honest and capable and humble. She's kind, and she's an entrepreneur who really understands her customers, me being one of them. So today's topic is starting and building a high-end brand. Welcome, Wendy. I'm so glad that you're with me and you're going to be sharing with our entrepreneurs.
Good morning. Nice to see you. And thank you for the introduction. That was beautiful.
Well, you are beautiful and you have done a phenomenal job. I just can't get over it. I've been from the moment that I met you, I wanted to talk to you. This is before I was doing any interviews like this. Okay. And I just wanted to talk to you and find out more about you. I always found you to be so interesting. You know, you're one of those people when when I met you, you're instantly likable. You know, you're inviting in that way. It's sort of a gift from God in that regard.
Thank you.
So you're in business for 34 years. Why did...
If you say it fast enough, it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't all upside going through those 34 years.
No.
But there's very rarely do you find people who have been in business that long. And after being in business that long, you know, I was just curious, how do you come to the decision that you're going to finally sell a business?
You know, that's a hard one. I don't know that I actually set out to sell at the moment that I did. I had toyed with selling over the last 5 or 6 years because there were changes in the market, a lot of capital investment in our industry. And I had actually, about 5 or 6 years ago, gone through the motions of doing it. just to test the waters. Quite frankly, I wanted to see what they were looking for, how they were evaluating businesses of my kind.
How
And
do
of
you
course,
how do you test? How do you say test the water? How do you?
I
If
went
I'm a full
through.
time business owner, been there for 4 years. How do I test the water? It's a process I know nothing about.
So, so I actually went through the sales process without the intention of selling.
Oh, okay.
And
Did the
I,
buyer
I
know that?
no,
Okay. The buyer must have perceived it at some point.
when I said no.
Okay.
But what I did was I got insight into what they were looking for, how my business would be valued, what were the key metrics they were looking for. And, our industry is very fractured because we have today more insurance driven optical than ever before. I am not insurance driven, and therefore I have an inherent value because of that. When you're insurance driven in our end of the industry, you're somewhat dictated to as to what your pricing is, the kind of people you're going to see in your practice, what kind of product you're going to carry. And I turned my back on that many, many years ago as it was starting. And so there's
How long
not
ago?
many.
How long ago did the insurance opticals start?
Well, when I started, there was zero insurance. I would say,
So
so that
what
was
year was that? Give me 34 years ago.
87,
Look at the face you make. I love it.
right? I know. So 1987, by the time we got to the mid 90s, insurance was starting to kind of rear its ugly head, if you will. It was coming, and everybody was like, this is what's coming, and you need to adjust accordingly. I went the exact opposite direction.
What were the stores? Were the
It's
stores,
very
let's say from
difficult for an
87 when you
independent to
started?
compete.
What
Yeah.
what did retail look like for optical in 1987? Like who were the competitors? How were they positioned?
Big bucks, big chains. If you think back to the the Pearl Visions, there was Eye Masters, all kinds of things. And what they did is they had the massive stores, and they had their own in-house lab where they manufactured lenses in the store, and they had the big windows so you could see them making your glasses. And they were all 3,000 to 4,000 square feet space.
And they were
Everything
all
went that
over.
way.
They were in every mall.
Yeah.
Every
Every
mall.
mall, all over.
Not only every mall, but every strip mall. I remember them being everywhere.
Yes.
So it was point of presence was there really point of presence. And I think, what was it? Get your lenses and get your glasses in 24 hours or 2 hours, or what was the promise?
It became 1 hour service.
1 hour service.
That
So
was the pinnacle.
when back then, were you working in optical?
Yes. Yeah.
You were.
Mm-hmm.
So take me back. I know we're getting way all of the subject, but
Yeah,
take me back to how you kind of. Well, first of all, you got kind of a strange accent. So where are you from? Where are you from originally? Where were you born? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, you froze for a moment. I was born in Liverpool, England, and then when
Home of
I
the
went.
Beatles?
That's exactly right. Now, hang on though. I had elocution lessons to get rid of the accent.
What does the accent sound like when you say something that is a Liverpudlian? Is that what it'd be called?
Liverpudlian,
Pudlian. Okay, there you go. Okay.
or the not so nice term, a Scouser. We're the brunt of jokes in the UK,
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I came here right after college.
What did your mom and dad do growing up there, Liverpool? Because Liverpool was basically wasn't it a manufacturing area, heavy manufacturing with lots of pubs? Whoop, you froze up on me. There you go.
Yeah, I'm dead. You hear me?
Yeah, I
I'm
hear
sorry.
you
Could
now.
you
Go
repeat
ahead.
that last question?
Pardon me?
Could you repeat that last question?
Yeah, I was saying, so Liverpool, where you grew up, I was talking about your parents. you grew up probably in what was then considered just either middle class or lower middle class kind of. It was a manufacturing, blue collar kind of environment, if I remember Liverpool. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
very much so. And a struggling city because it was so dependent on shipping and the docks,
yeah.
and that all went away. I was a typical. My father's family moved from Ireland. My mother was. I had a Catholic father and a Protestant mother, and in Liverpool that didn't go down well.
Oh,
It's a
really?
little bit of a fractured city, kind of like Ireland was, where the Protestants were separated from the Catholics.
I
So
didn't
a
know
little
that.
bit of that,
Okay.
but and a lot of areas that were never rebuilt after the war. Quite honestly, rows of houses that. It wasn't unusual when I was young that half the row would still be derelict.
I mean, you could actually see it bombed out.
Yeah.
Wow. What years was that? What year does that get back to when you're a little girl?
Well, I was born in 65, so some areas were still,
That's 20
uh,
years after the war.
yeah,
That's incredible. We never think about that now. We see because we go
yeah,
to
and
London
the
and everything
industrial
seems to be
areas that
built
got
up.
hit because the shipping industry wasn't there anymore. So what were they going to do with these areas? It's actually fantastic to go back now and see that the docks have all been rebuilt, not only for tourism but for residential, but also they have movie studios there. In fact, Peaky Blinders is filmed there.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so what did your dad do for a living?
So my
Was he the one from Ireland or was it your mother?
Yes. No, my father was from Southern Ireland,
Okay.
and he was a carpenter.
So he left there because there was no work, probably in Ireland.
He was a child when they came over. His father actually worked for the shipyards,
Oh, I see. Okay.
um, and so he moved over. But extreme poverty, 8 children, 2-bedroom house. Um, no bathroom. All my relatives had what we would call outhouses.
So this is you grew up with you had 7 siblings?
My father.
Oh, your father did. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, I only had two, um, but so yeah, it was a extremely poor, upbringing, and then we moved out of Liverpool when I was about 2, and we went to a town called Wigan, which was another industrial town, but it was booming. Um, yeah, and they've lived in the Northwest all their lives, and then my father moved to the United States in the early 80s, which is how I ended up coming over here.
That's for a carpenter. So a blue collar worker like that, skilled blue collar worker. Yeah. He didn't isn't that very unusual for them to move from their
Yeah.
community? So
Yes, but
what made him did you go to college over there? Did you go to college at all? I don't know.
I did. I went to college in England. And I think my father moved. My father always wanted something more than he had. America was seen as this big, land of opportunity, and everything in America is bigger and better. And I think that was the draw. And he had the opportunity to come over with a construction company, and he actually moved to Texas, to Houston. And then Houston went through a slump, and Atlanta was booming, and he ended up moving to Atlanta.
What year was that?
84,
Did you move
maybe?
did you move with him or did you stay in college?
No, I was still in college. I didn't come over until 87.
Where was your college located was it in England?
Yes, it was in the Midlands in a town called Crewe. Like, so all the names of them have changed right now. It was mainly a teaching college. I did business in college, but it was in a town called Crewe.
Were you the first? Were you the oldest? How many kids? How many other brothers and sisters do you have?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one of each, and they both live in Atlanta.
Are they younger than you?
Yes.
So you're
My
the
sister,
oldest.
I'm the oldest. My sister's a year younger than me, and my brother is 9 years younger than me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So the 9 years younger. How about that? So when you go to college, were you the first to go to college in your family?
Yes, I was.
Why did that happen? Why didn't being a female, two blue collar workers, your mom she didn't work?
Mom worked. She was a printer. And back then, as soon as you got pregnant, you had to leave work. Luckily, she managed to hide her pregnancy until she was about 6 months pregnant with me. But then, as soon as she started to show, they made her work. And there was no structure in England to allow women to go back to work. And so she did not until my brother was probably about 9 or 10.
Oh my gosh. So they made you leave work when you became pregnant.
Yes.
It's funny. I just read a book about. I got interested in this book because I interviewed somebody who I found out as I'm interviewing his mother was the first female White House correspondent. This is during the '60s, and when she's on TV, they wouldn't put pregnant women on TV. Okay, so they made it so that when she was on TV, they would only show her from here up. Okay. And she was, she, on her last child, she actually went from the recording studio where she was on TV to the hospital to have the baby to come back literally 7 days later so she wouldn't lose her. It wasn't an excuse for them to fire her. Okay.
Gosh.
So this is amazing that you're talking about what it was like government in England to say, oh, if you get pregnant, then we want you to stay home with your kids. That's it. So you're fired. That's it. There's no
Yeah.
work for you. Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
So that was what, 1965. So
It was the same
obviously
time.
changed a lot, but yes, it's
That was the same time.
yeah, there was
That
no
is
option.
wonderful. So why did you decide? Who encouraged you, or why did you decide to go to college?
I think my mother always wanted me to have something that I could fall back on and be independent. And it's certainly the same way I've raised my daughters. That, you know, it's great to have a family and have children, but you have to have a life that can support you outside of that.
Why did your mother think that way?
Well, I think because she was probably felt that a lot of her choices were taken away from her. And when she did re-enter the workforce, she had to retrain. And when she went
So
back
she
in,
liked to work. She liked to make money.
she loved it.
She probably, in her heart, she was very ambitious.
When she went back, within 5 years, she was running the print department at Lancashire University. She just went in and took over. Yes.
Sounds like you've got a little bit of her DNA. That's what it sounds
Probably.
like. Was your father somebody who encouraged you to go to school, or do you remember the conversation between mom and dad? And dad was like, "Why does she need to do that? She should just become a name it, right?"
I think my mom was certainly the biggest push. I grew up in an era where my father would say things like, little girls should be seen and not heard. And I was always, no, that's not going to happen.
You were seen and heard.
So I was a little bit of a rebel maybe in that respect.
Yeah. So
I always knew there had to be something more, right?
So then here's the thing that happens. So you go to college, you wind up going to a teacher's college. The majority of the people there, which if it's a teacher's college, a lot of times is mostly female back then. Probably was. I'm making assumptions here. Tell me if I'm wrong. And so why would you not just mainstream say, well, I guess you go to school, you become a teacher at college, and you come out and you're a teacher. I have a job. Why not that? What happened?
Well, I thought about it, and then I started looking at the opportunities for teachers in England and the rate of pay and what I'd be doing for the rest of my life. And I just said, no, I have to do something more. I didn't know what more was or what I wanted. It wasn't particularly burning ambition for me to be a teacher. It was kind of like, okay, I'll go there. Because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I ended up switching and I did a business course because I did not know what I wanted to do.
Did you know? See, one of the things that happened to me is I grew up in a household of blue collar household. And so all of the talk around the dinner table is about hourly wages or, the work itself, but there isn't any talk about business. So when I went to college and somebody said you should take business, I didn't understand, even though I worked for businesses, because I had to work through, I didn't think of business. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't have any sort of growing up examples of that, like your daughters did.
Yeah.
While they were growing up, I mean, business talk was just part of their life. You didn't have any of that. So that's why I would say, why business while you were in college?
Because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like, I got to do something. Let me do this. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I remember sitting in an accounting class and I hated the accounts classes. And I remember my teacher standing next to me saying, Miss Brennan, you are going to have to grasp this concept. And I remember thinking to myself, I will never need this. And then, how many years later, it's a daily thing. So I'm sure he's laughing at me.
So when you were sitting there, I never need this. I don't like what I'm doing. Why stick with it? Why not say, I guess I'll go back to teaching? Because some young people, that's exactly the reaction they would have. Because you understood teaching. Mm-hmm. Because the example's right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, business doesn't really send you out into the world prepared or trained to do anything. I think I always realized that I maybe had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I've worked since I was 14 years old in one way or another. I've worked in the local sweet shops in England on the weekend. I've worked in bars. I did all kinds of part-time jobs while I was going through school and college. And I don't know, it may be an inner drive that I just knew something would be coming at some point, but never really knew what it was. And I just thought this would give me a good basis for whatever I decide to do.
Did you have anybody in college that provided you with encouragement in business as opposed to, to continue to build, to continue to pursue a business degree versus, teaching or some other degree?
No.
Didn't have it. So you're on your own with this, and your mother's just kind of behind you saying, yeah, just continue to finish school. And then your family leaves you.
Well, my mother stayed in England. My parents were separated. My father went to the UK. My mother still lives in England. So I had the opportunity to go to America. I can't imagine what my mother felt now that I have daughters.
Yeah.
When your daughter comes to you at 21 and says, Mom, I'm moving to America.
Wow.
It's like, what?
I'll tell you what, we just had that experience with my third child, who's my first son. And they decided, here we have two daughters who are married and live in Atlanta, and we have grandchildren with those daughters, right? We have a younger son he's going to be 29 in a couple of days, okay? And he lives here, and he works for a technology company. And then we have this son, David, who is married, who just announced that they're pregnant, okay? And also a couple weeks later announced that they decided they're going to live in London. And you're right. I know exactly how your mother felt, in that and what I got to is you have this expectation of how your family's going to be around and how it's all going to work. And it's just dashed. It's just dashed. How can my little Wendy leave me? And take it almost personal, but even though you have high hopes for Wendy, as I have high hopes for David, I mean, it's his family, not mine. he needs to do what's best for him. But it did that. It's dashed expectations, and it's hard to deal with. So I know how your
Well,
mom felt. That's the only reason I bring up that story.
yeah, and I think about it that we didn't really we didn't have FaceTime back then. There was no way to be in contact. Telephones were extremely expensive
Yeah.
to talk, so we used to have to ration our time on the phone, and so we'd have every Saturday morning we'd have 20 minutes that we would talk that wouldn't cost either one of us an arm and a leg. You know,
You
and so
remember
that,
how much it cost for that call? I'm sure you do.
I can't remember, but it was not cheap. I remember sitting a clock in front of me.
Yeah. I remember counting those things. They were like $3 a minute or $4 a
Something like
minute.
that.
You sit there and now we don't, now you're thinking it's nothing, right? I mean, I call
Oh
my
yeah,
son and it's the same as calling him if he was in Marietta. I mean, it doesn't matter.
that's exactly right.
That's funny
Yeah.
how those things. So so you graduate from college with a degree in just business. Is that what it was
Yeah.
called?
It was business and actually purchasing.
Purchasing. Okay. Did you
And no
did you do any
idea.
kind of internship or anything that would be akin to what we'd call an internship today for while you were in college, that gave you a little bit of hands-on experience in your studies?
They never really had anything substantial set up to support us in that. As part of the course, we had to find a business that would allow us during our summer to examine their business, look at their books, that kind of thing. And it was on us to find it.
Okay.
Luckily, there was a guy in the village that I lived in that I used to work part-time in his fish and chip shop. And I asked him if, I'd still keep working in the fish and chip shop, but would he allow me to help him do some of his, business, running the business, and give me some insight into his bookkeeping and how he managed his employees and that kind of thing. And he was nice enough to do it. And so that's kind of how it started. And I remember thinking, this is pretty cool, right?
Did you also think, that accounting course really did come in handy?
I started to get an inkling of what my teacher was talking about. I paid a lot more attention after that.
So your thought, though, I interrupted your thought of, this is pretty good. This is interesting. So that's the first time you looked inside a business. Could you expand on that a bit?
So say that again, Charlie. I'm sorry.
I said this is the first time that you had a look inside a business as opposed to just working for a business, right? You weren't counting the number of hours times the number of pounds per hour they said they were paying you to figure out what you were going to get. You looked inside a business. Tell me what that experience was like. How it affected you see?
Yeah, what I kind of came away with was wondering why some of the decisions he made, why he'd made them.
Huh.
Because I'd worked part-time for this gentleman for about 2.5 years. And so, I had seen the running of the store and just having a little bit of a window into the back of it. It tied everything together. And so, when he started breaking down the expenses, I mean, something as silly as when we would serve someone a portion of fish and chips,
Yeah.
we had to use a particular scoop to put the chips in because that meant you weren't over serving someone with chips, right? And I just remember thinking, when he started with the math about how much his potatoes cost and all of this, and I was like, I get it, right?
Huh.
Like, because there's such a small margin in it, and they're hiring kids essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so he's got this business model, and he's saying no. So you've got to measure this, and you've got to do this, and then even not overcooking food, so it's not sitting there too long. Because if business was slow that day, he'd have all this wasted food. I just found it intriguing, and in fact, my first job after college was with a food company. I felt that's where my comfort level was. So I actually went in as a trainee manager. It was a bakery company that also operated a cafeteria.
How did you? I'm going to get into that for just a second, but how did you? What did you learn about being an employee and looking back, having employed people? What did you learn from those years as you were working your way through high school and college? You were working in those jobs, and you get exposed to. That's sort of like the first time we're competitive in the marketplace. What did you observe, and
You
what did
know,
you take away? It's sort of like we watch our parents and say, well, if I have kids, I'll never do that, or I will do that. I think that happens. I just thinking about it, happens as being an employee. We watch other people.
you do. And I always was very lucky in that I had a great work ethic. I was always the hardest working, I was always on time.
Uh-huh.
I saw the employees who were trying to get paid but not work. And I
Yeah.
always, I could see them and recognize them very, very quickly. And I also I remember working in a pub, and the owners of the pub would not really work very much. They just liked the social aspect of it. So they were always on the other side of the bar drinking. And part of me was like, wow, that's a really good job. Maybe I'll own a pub one day.
Looks
And
like
then
fun, right? You're just a
looks
big
like
party
fun,
all
right?
day. That's it. Just a
Yeah.
big party.
But I could also see the I could also see the pitfalls of it, in that they didn't have their finger on the pulse of what was going on. And some other places I'd worked,
Like, what did
they were
that
just
mean?
better
What does that
operators.
mean? What does
There
that
was
mean? They didn't have their finger on the plus.
well, too many things were sliding.
Ah,
The service wasn't as good. If they were offering food offerings, the food wasn't as good. They just weren't as on top of running the business as they should have been. And I had worked for some other operators that I thought, wow, they really get it. They were a little more pedantic. They were on top of you more, and maybe there was something in the middle, right? So
yeah.
you're not micromanaged. Those were truly successful businesses. And if I look back now, the longevity of those businesses, the more successful ones were the ones that one either had a fabulous, because in owning pubs, typically they have a fabulous run for 5 years and then they retire because it's a tough business. And some of them didn't even last a year to 2 years.
Hmm.
So,
But
it was just,
you were drawn to and respected, I should say, the the detail operators, the people, like you said. I love that story of the fish and chips, where the guy knew the cost of his potatoes. He was down into the business basics, so he understood his cost of goods sold, if you will, right?
yes,
So that he wasn't just trying to be, he wanted to give fair fish and chips for a fair price, but he needed to make a profit doing it,
yes.
right? And you learn that at a very early age. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really my first kind of insight into it, and I don't know that I absorbed it to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna, if I have a business, this is how I'm gonna run it. But it was just all little stepping stones, if you will, that kind of added up. So by the time I did get my own business, I had a lot of things that I could pull from. I'd had a lot of exposure between the age of 14 and 21.
Yeah, but look what happened. I think it's interesting that we walk away with a view from our business, from our work, okay? And we either walk away with the view of an employee. It's all about me. What kind of wages am I getting? Is it fair compared to where else I could work? That kind of a thing, right? It's almost a blue collar kind of a mentality, if you will. But I'll call it the employee mentality. Or you walk away with the business person's mentality. How does this business work? What makes it go? Why is that employee, not showing up for work and not getting fired. Oh, they did get fired. That's a good thing, right? Because you're thinking like an employer, not an employee. Okay. I had somebody come to me who was one of my son's friends, and here he is working in a big box retail store, and he was complaining to me that he works harder than everybody else, and it's just not fair that they get paid what he gets paid. And now, just from this conversation, I'm realizing, of course, he has an employee view, not a business view, knowing, yeah, he needs to keep doing that because he's going to go far beyond who those people are and the position that he's in now. He's going to advance. But he never changed that attitude. He quit college and wound up being a blue-collar worker. It's just interesting. So, you say, why did I get that view and the other people didn't? But you did. So you graduate college, and then why didn't you just get a good job with some employers in the greater UK? Okay. I mean,
Yeah, so, back then, unemployment was really high in England.
what year was that?
That would have been 85-ish.
Okay. All right.
And, so I came out and there were a lot of management training programs then, which we were encouraged to go into. One of the top management training programs, by the way, was McDonald's. But I just was like, no, I can't do McDonald's. Even though I interviewed with them. And they
Why
were
did you
taking,
say that?
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I was just like, I don't want to fry chips, and I already had enough in the fish and chip shop. No burgers, I need something else.
I didn't want to fry chips at scale, right?
No more chips. You go home and you smell of it. I'd already smelled of it for 3 years. I'm done. I wasn't afraid of the work or the hard work or, because I ended up
a funny story once. I had somebody who was
like,
going to sell me a hamburger franchise, and there was a great opportunity. I can't even remember the name of it, but they took me to it during lunchtime, and I went home, and I actually threw up. I got sick. I was in the kitchen for like 30 minutes, and I said, oh, my God. So I know. I love that. I didn't want to smell like it anymore. I smelled like it for 3 years. But go ahead.
It's
so it's not McDonald's.
It's one of those you can't get it out of your hair. You can't get it out of your clothes.
Go ahead. So it's not McDonald's. What do you do?
So I went to work for a company called Stanton's, which was a bakery company. I went in as an assistant manager.
In England?
In England.
Okay.
I was actually living in a town called Shrewsbury, which is on the Welsh border.
Okay.
Not far from where I graduated college. And
God.
I loved it.
That's a worse accent than the Liverpudlians.
Oh, it's a different one.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus, I had to work with Welsh people who were not particularly enamored with the British. So there was another challenge. So it was mostly women. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was all women. And so I started as the assistant manager, and the area manager came to me very quickly and said, what are your goals? And so I was polite in saying, I love this company and I'd love to be a manager one day. Really didn't think this would be anywhere that I would want to stay long term.
What was the actual first job? What was the actual first job out of college? Did you hear me? You didn't hear me.
Out of college?
Yeah, what was that first job? What were you actually doing? And it's very unusual. It was an all-female business.
So as an assistant manager, I had to come in early in the morning. The front of the store was a retail bakery. So we would get the deliveries from the truck, and we would stock the window. Okay. And then we would prepare food for the cafeteria, sandwiches, that kind of thing. And then the administrative part of it was the reports at the end of the day. how many cream cakes we dropped on the floor, that we couldn't sell, that kind
Right.
of thing. And then the staffing, the scheduling,
But it was a
is basically
female,
what it
so it
was.
was a female retail business. Did it have multiple stores?
They had, they had probably 150 locations.
Okay. And so you were working retail. This was your introduction to retail, in effect. It wasn't
Yeah,
the
I mean,
restaurant business.
I,
It was you're actually selling, you were selling baked products, okay, and probably coffee and things, right? But it was a retail
yeah.
business. Yeah. Okay. So then what happened?
I think the biggest thing I learned from that was how to deal with staff, quite honestly, because they had a lot of part-time staff, and again, all women. And I think sometimes we're our own worst enemy,
Uh huh.
and they weren't invested. A lot of these were part-time workers, and said they were moms, and they're certainly the business doesn't come first. So it was constant call outs, or I can't come in today because my child is sick, and so it was constantly juggling. So that was a big learning curve.
What was the big learning from all of that? Because that sounds
Um,
like that sounds like you're running a McDonald's, store.
yeah,
I mean, that is the same thing they have. It's like, I don't feel like working today. And if you say, well, if you don't come in, you're fired. They're like, that's okay. I'll get something else. It doesn't matter. There's just, you don't have any power in effect over this. So,
no, you don't. The challenge was to find full-time workers that were more invested. And if we were going to stay with so many part-time workers because of whatever labor laws or benefits, then you had to have ample on your roster that you could fill in the slots, because you could not function without it. And I think that was my first exposure to, a 50, 55 hour week.
how did you
I was the coverage.
yeah, you were the coverage, right? So you finally came to a ratio that said, if I need three part-time workers, I need 30 people in the pool, or whatever the number might be. I'm sure you had a ratio, and then it worked. But what did you learn about hiring full-time workers in a retail business? That would stick around. I mean, I'm sure you hired some that didn't stick around, and then you finally start learning, what
Yeah.
is it that you're offering them that makes it attractive enough for them to stay?
Yeah, and this was at a time when England was certainly struggling, and so there were a lot of people out there that just needed a job.
Oh,
Not that this was going to be their job for the rest of their life, but they had to have a job. In a way, you kind of benefited from that, because you probably had access to people that would be doing something else if unemployment wasn't so high. Um, but that was never going to be long term. As the economy picked up, you were going to lose these people. And then we started a training program for people coming straight out of high school. And how can we get those people on and train them so that we're actually giving them an education and not just retail? Retail is tough, and if you don't have the right personality for it, it's a challenge. And so, you have to marry all these parts. You actually have to hire someone that actually likes people. And I know that sounds silly, but if you don't like people and engaging with people, it is not the right job for you.
that makes a lot of sense, and it seems obvious when you say it,
Yeah.
right? Hire
So
people who like.
it was a challenge. It was it, and I don't know that the company, quite honestly, even looked at it that way. The company as a whole, I think they were just so used to pushing part-time workers through that we just keep going, we just keep going, we just keep
So
pulling more in.
this training and all that, was this your idea?
In my store, yes, yeah.
Wow. So when you came to that idea, you said, if I can catch them early enough, then I can train them into this. And I bet you those people did, even after you left, they stuck around. A lot of those people that you brought in.
It would be nice to think they did. I mean, or at least got a start in something,
Yeah,
that would
right.
propel them to something else. Yeah, that would be my hopes.
You must have also been somebody. What do you think if those employees that were hired by you? What do you think that they said about Wendy back then? This is Wendy, little Wendy at 22, 24 years old, right?
Well, oh my gosh, I was so much younger than anybody else,
Right. That's what always happens, right?
and that was a challenge, quite honestly. Because some of these people had worked in different environments and they're like, oh, what does she know? Blah, 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 blah. And there's always a fine balance with saying, no, I don't know it all, but I realize that I need to help us all
Hmm.
here. And I've got an idea. And what do you think about this? That way, when I say to, the lady that's had to work the last 5 weekends in a row because we've had no coverage, if we do this, isn't this going to make your life easier so you're not having to work quite as much? We're not as dependent upon you. And so I think if you can appeal to everything that each person is looking to achieve, they're more willing to work with you through this.
That means that you really took an interest in people and who they were in their lives, and then you engage them in the business knowing this about them to see how it all fit for them and fit for the business.
I don't know if I thought about it that way back then.
But that's what you've done. That's what you did.
Yeah.
That's almost like that's like a God-given sort of skill, I mean, it just was part of you. That's how you were interested in people. Like you made a comment, only hire people that are really interested in people. You said that sounds stupid, but that's exactly what it is. But you were that kind of person. So if you're interested in people, you're asking about them and learning about them and their lives. And if you're a good business person, you're going to build that bridge saying, hey, this is what's going on in the business. This is what's going on. I know this is going on in your life. How does this work together? That's where you made that's part of your success. And it started back in Stanton's in England.
Yeah.
And
And I was not there very long. I think I probably became a little disillusioned with the corporate structure there, and how little support they were willing to give to new initiatives. And
what support were you looking for? This is an interesting thing too. So this impacts entrepreneurs who are working within companies. What disillusioned you that kind of made you said, this isn't going to work long term for me?
They weren't willing to look at the personnel problems the way they should have, and they were quite happy. But if you were salaried, obviously you're only getting paid so much money. It became very evident that the salaried people were working way beyond the hours that they should, and that didn't work-life balance, right? Which I don't think I've ever had. But when you have employees, you have to consider it. And I don't think they were invested in that. And so they were quite happy for me to be there 3 hours every morning before store opening.
Yeah.
And if I needed time off, it was a struggle.
So you felt at some point they're just taking advantage of you.
Yes.
It was interesting. I just to let you know that this continues on. I had a friend of mine who's got a son-in-law who's working in the car rental business. This was during this pandemic thing. The guy was literally working 85 hours a week. 85 hours a week. He was getting up at 4 a.m. and getting home at 10 p.m. kind of stuff, And he has a family.
Yeah.
And I talked to the guy to see if I could help him out. And I said, well, did you bring this up to corporate? And this is regional manager level kind of, or district manager level. So he's getting paid good money. But he said, yeah, I talked to him and they just said, yeah, we're all kind of working hard. That's it. You need to work hard too. And that was it. And so it still happens that way,
Yeah.
So that's something, once you have that experience, you take it with you. So how did you wind up from there? Was your next step America?
It was.
How did you do that?
So I was able to come over. My father was still there, so I had everything set up for me to walk into. My sister had already moved over.
Oh, okay.
And so when I came, then it's like, what am I going to do with
But
myself?
why didn't you just find another job in England? Why did you decide I needed to really go to the United States?
I had been over to visit, and he was living in Atlanta at that time. And look, let's be real. England is cold and wet, and you come to Atlanta, and it's like being on holiday all the time. And I was like, oh, you've got swimming pools. It's kind of like that. Remember
So
the
why did my son and daughter-in-law move to England?
crazy?
All right, you're the second Englishman who told them that. Okay, but go ahead.
But it was like it was just a totally different way of life, and I was like, I'm young enough. I need to try it, right?
Okay.
If I don't try it now, by the time I get married and start having kids and all that stuff, I'll never have the opportunity. So I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And I loved it. I loved Atlanta. Of course, it's a lot different than what it is now. It was just fantastic. And so I had to find a job.
Did you move did your father live in town or did he live in the suburbs?
He lived in Decatur.
In Decatur. Okay, so close to downtown. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you moved in with him?
I did. I moved in with him initially. I think I stayed with him for about 9 months.
What about all the visa, green card, all that kind of stuff? Were you able to get employment?
Yeah. I can't remember all the details of it, but he had something set up through his company. And maybe I was still listed as, I don't know if I was still listed as a dependent or I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
But we
you were able to work.
Yeah, we ended up with a work permit. Because I didn't become a citizen and till probably 20 years later. I'd already had kids and stuff. But yeah, we had a green card. So a permit and then a green card, if I remember correctly.
So what do you do for your first job? Now you're in Decatur.
So I started interviewing, and I interviewed for an ear, nose, and throat doctor as a receptionist because they loved the way my voice sounded. And
use all your assets. Use all your assets. I love it.
I can do this. And so they sat me at this desk, and there was this big board, that you press different buttons for different extensions. And no, I think I lasted about 3 days. First of all, I kept getting the buttons wrong, but I was just like, I cannot answer phones for a long period of time. I can do this temporarily. And then my father's fiance was working for a dentist in Peachtree Center.
Okay.
And she knew of an optician downstairs who was looking for help. And she said, why don't you go and talk to them? And the dentist said, yeah, he's a good guy. Go talk to him. And so I went to talk to him, and that's the job that I ended up staying in.
Was it optician being retail, or was it?
Yes.
He was in retail. Okay.
Retail. Mm-hmm.
And what was the job?
I was now an apprentice optician.
Okay.
So in Georgia, you can apprentice or you can go to school for 2 years. And so I signed up for the apprenticeship program.
And tell me, just so people know, what is an optician? What is an optician? What's the job of an optician?
So we fill prescriptions.
Okay.
So the same as you would take a medical prescription to a pharmacist, you would bring us an eyeglass prescription or a contact lens prescription, and we fill it.
I got it. Okay. So that's a certified optician is necessary for that, to do that function. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And in Georgia, it's a licensed position, so you have to be licensed by the state.
I got it. Okay. So you start as an apprentice.
Yeah. And I loved it. And the guy that I was working for had zero business acumen. And so before I knew it, I'm doing all his bookkeeping.
Was he a single store?
Single store.
Okay. So he owned the store. Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing all his bookkeeping. I'm doing all his. I had to learn all the tax paperwork, for the 940s, 941s. He had not been filing them, period. And
Whoa,
so
you
I
could
had.
be
I,
in
sh- I
jail.
shouldn't say that, right? But
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. So when I learned the ropes, I was like, you could be in trouble here. And so I had to sort all this out, and I absolutely loved it. So I had found myself in this position where I was enjoying the dispensing part of it and learning all about optics,
Hmm.
and I was getting to do the business part of it. So it was a perfect marriage for
Was
me.
it a low end store, low end optical, or?
Back then, they were all low end. There wasn't high end.
Oh,
The
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
merchandise was dictated by very few companies. They were all large companies, and so any store you went into pretty much would carry those brands. It just was not there yet. It wasn't until about 1989 that these high end lines started to come on the scene, and I'm sure everybody's heard of Oliver Peoples. And that literally was one of the first lines that started the pivot or the turning point in this industry.
I've never heard of that. And like you said, it's funny. Everybody probably heard of this. And I bet you everyone who's listening to this never heard of it unless they're an optician. Okay.
It was a fashion phenomenon. They came up with clip-on sunglasses. I mean,
Okay.
this was like a product that was just sought everywhere. I will be shocked if some of your listeners have not worn Oliver Peoples at some point in their life.
I'm sure I have. Okay. I just didn't know what they were. All right. I'm sorry. But I know I had several pairs of clip on sunglasses.
There
Okay.
you go.
All right. That sounds great. So that was so glasses were functional up until then. They weren't fashion, if you will.
Yes, very
Okay.
much so.
When did Elton John start? Because he was the first guy that I remember, entertainer wise, that really made eyeglasses sort of something you talked about.
Yeah, so he was obviously wearing eyeglasses, but it wouldn't have been until probably the early 90s when eyeglasses were starting to become much more fashionable. In fact, he used to buy eyewear from a company in LA called LA Eyeworks.
Okay.
He also did a collaboration in the early 90s with Oliver Peoples for his Elton John Foundation. And so this is when it really started taking off,
I see. Okay.
that it became super fashionable.
So here you are in this little store with this person.
Mhm.
You did that from what, 1980, what? When did you
So
join? 80?
started there in '87. We ended up getting married.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
We got married.
So he
And,
fell in love with the young lady who kept him out of jail because
well,
he
I
filed the
think maybe
940s.
maybe he was like, I got to tie her up, right? Um, so that was when we had the one store in Peachtree Center. And then we were approached by, I got my license. So within 2 years, I was a licensed optician. And so that meant I could practice on my own. I
Yeah.
didn't have to work under him anymore. And so we were approached by Phipps Plaza, who had just done a major renovation.
Hmm.
And they were looking for local talent. They didn't want chains in there because Phipps was always a little more unique and high end.
Yeah.
And so we were approached to see if we would be interested in it. And my husband at the time really, I don't think was that interested in it, but I was.
And his surname was Sally.
That's where the Sally came from.
That's
Yeah.
where it comes from. Okay. And
Yeah,
that's Salle.
correct.
Right. Okay.
And so that we ended up opening in Phipps. I was pregnant with my first child when I negotiated that lease. And so that we opened in 93. It
Okay.
opened for business in 93. And that really was the first foray, if you want to talk about high end. So between that 87 and 93, the industry had pivoted to the point that I already recognized that I couldn't compete with the big chains, didn't have the marketing budget. So how was I going to compete in this arena? And that's kind of how the decision morphed is to go more into high end, to follow these brands that were not easily recognizable or that not everybody was selling them. And so I had to start going to trade shows to meet with people and try and find brands that were a little more exclusive, and would offer something completely different that you could get in your average optometrist office or big box retailer.
Who were these new brands that were coming out that were fashionable brands, fashion brands, if you will? Who they probably were trying to sell into mass distribution to get into those big box stores and everything else. How
No.
did they weren't, okay?
No,
What were
they
they
had a
trying?
different approach. It was almost at the same time that these manufacturers realized this is the market we need to go, because the big box, all they wanted was discount, discount, discount. And a lot of these eyeglasses were not, they were being manufactured with such precision and such quality materials that you couldn't possibly discount them enough. They were more of an artisan piece. So, back then it was brands called Matsuda,
Right.
right? And at the time, extremely expensive. I think we were selling them for $350 back then, and it was like, oh, nothing sells for $350 in our
But from a
industry.
purchasing standpoint, they were also many multiples higher in cost to the retailer, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it was, I'd have to think very hard. It would keep me awake at night, quite honestly, investing this much money. And the other shift was the big box retailers would come to you, or wholesalers would come and say, you only need to buy 5 or 6 pieces and we'll give you terms. The new brands would say, we're a new brand. You have to buy in 25 pieces and there are no terms. And so it really became you had to become a much more astute buyer. You had to know your market. You had
well,
to
you
have your
were.
customer in mind.
Yeah. So here you are. You were working with now who's your husband, right? At Peachtree Center. Is that where you said you were?
Yep.
Okay. In this store that was in effect a single store, low end market store, right? I mean, so do you remember what the inventory that you had there cost in that store way back when?
At the very peak, about $60,000.
In total inventory, right? So then you go over to Phipps Plaza and you're going to open up this new store, and you decide after talking to them and what they're interested in that you're going to go high end. You're going to do this fashion brand stuff, right? In
Yeah.
1993. So what was the inventory in that store, which was probably was it about the same footprint, square feet and all that?
No, we went from 450 square feet to about 900.
Okay, so you doubled the square footage. So what was what was the cost of the inventory, if you can remember back then?
It was over around 200,000. And not just because we put in a tremendous, amount of product. It was the caliber of product. We became a Cartier retailer. And
That's what I
Cartier,
mean. That's what I'm
yeah.
trying to get at here is
So
to
it's a
say,
luxury line. It's
yeah, so
higher
all of a
end.
sudden my inventory cost, the amount of money I have tied up is 3x, right? 3 times what it was in the low end retail that I was used to. Well, when you went so was it your idea or your husband's idea at the time to go high end?
Mine.
Okay.
Um,
How did
we
you
would,
convince him? How did you convince him to do that? Because it's like, wait a minute, I'm not really good at this business stuff, but I'm good enough to know
yeah.
that this could put us out of business.
It was a leap of faith, and the writing was on the wall. There were too many of the people that we had known in the industry that had stayed status quo, that were losing their market share. The business was changing. You either changed or you'd be gobbled up. we had already had a large chain try to open up in Peachtree Center and came to us and said, well, I'm going to put you out of business anyway, so let me just give you $30,000 and go away. And we were like, no. So, we saw it coming. And so how
Well,
do
it
you
is. It's sort
compete?
of like being the corner grocery store when Walmart was coming along, right? Is that kind of a thing? Yeah. Because I
Yep.
do remember there were big box retail, and they were everywhere. Okay.
Yep.
So then you retreat into this high end, knowing that that's a place they can't go
Yes.
because the business model for the suppliers of the frames and the business models of the buyers, these big box retail, they just don't match at all.
No, not at
Can't
all.
happen. So it was, so all of a sudden, small retail, niche retail made sense again if you stayed high end.
Yeah, and things started to become very exclusive and secretive in the market, which was kind of exciting. I
You
remember
make
when
it you make it
Armani,
sound sinful the way you say that.
right?
Okay, I love
No.
that.
So Armani was launched, and Armani you used to have reps that would come into your store and show you product. Armani said, no, there are no reps. You need to come and meet us in a hotel room. And before you come, let me just tell you that our minimum buy-in is X, whatever it was. And it was like, oh my gosh, all right, I have to go see this product, right? They obviously think so highly of it. And so we went to this hotel, and my husband at the time was like, no, no, that's just way too much money. And I said, you know what? We're going to do it. We are going to do it. And we became the highest volume Armani dealer in the Southeast within the next 3 years.
Did you know that the buyers were there, or did you just fall in love with the product?
The product.
You fell in love with the product. Okay.
Yeah. I've always had a good eye for being able to look at a niche or what we don't carry and what we need to carry and who I'm not servicing. And obviously in business, you can't be everything to everyone, right? We found our niche and this is where we fall. But within that niche, I need to cover all those people.
How did you know that? How did you know your customers? Because the customers that you were
Because
serving
I
with
had
your
people
husband and
coming in
Piedmont.
constantly.
Oh,
So, Charlie Paparelli comes in and he says, here's what I want. And I'm like, I don't have anything for a Charlie Paparelli.
I see.
How do I get this? I need to find this. He's asking for something specific that I've obviously missed and I haven't covered. And so that's kind of how it built. And that's how we developed these brands. And we very quickly became so well known in our industry. I didn't have to go out and search them anymore. They came to me. They wanted to be in our store. We were always the first call when they were looking at the Southeast. So it made life a little bit easier.
Wow. So when did you know that it was really working for you?
When I got to cash a paycheck,
How long did that take?
I would write myself a check every 2 weeks or whatever, and I'd stash it away. It looked like I did well, but I just could never cash any of them. And so the pivot point was when we did more in a week at Phipps than we were doing in a month at Peachtree Center. And it happened within the first 6 months of us opening.
And you never brought those new brands into Peachtree Center. You just kept that as a low-end store to serve that office community in effect, right?
The brands differed slightly. There was some crossover, but yeah, Phipps was the springboard really for high-end.
How far in debt were you, if you will, if I put it that way, or how much money did you have tied up before you felt like you could actually start cashing your paychecks?
Well, we had debt with our inventory, which I really wasn't worried about. We didn't really have any. We had taken a small loan out for the construction.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say we had about $100,000 in debt.
Okay.
And we felt that was manageable. And because we could see the progress each month, and the moving of product that I really wasn't very.
How long did it actually take for, like, if you start a new retail store like that with a new line, are there statistics that say you need to make it by this point or you're out of business or it takes this long to make it, to where you're profitable and things are working?
Well, you mean if you want to break it down line by line before you would say that this line's not working?
No. I'm talking about the business itself. I'm transcending lines at this point.
Yeah, I kind of, we had a 6-month plan in our head. We already knew that Phipps had great foot traffic. And Phipps, even though it doesn't look like a really busy mall, the people that are in it are shoppers. They're not time wasters. They come in, they shop, they leave, right? And so unlike Lenox, which I had a store in Lenox several years later, where people just spend all day and didn't buy a thing.
Right. It's just a place to hang out, right?
Yeah. So I knew that it was just a matter of getting some exposure and it would take off. I didn't worry about it. I know that sounds crazy, but I had the utmost faith that this was going to work.
How did you know? No. You knew. You just had a vision for it.
I did.
And did you connect pretty easily with these high-end buyers?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, consumers, I'm talking about it then.
Very easily.
You fell in love with the merchandising side. You just love the high-end stuff. Yeah. And then you fell in love and really connected with your customers.
Yes.
Did your husband spend any time in that store?
Yeah, he did. He was a great optician. And so from the technical aspects, he was great. The other parts of it, no, not so good. But he was a good people person, and so we made a good team.
Did he have any connection with the customers, or that's just not? You say.
No, he did. From a dispensing standpoint, filling the prescriptions, he did. Yeah.
Did he have an appreciation for the quality of the products?
I think so. I don't think he was as excited about that part of it as I was. For me to see a line that has launched and to watch it build and to be able to give them feedback from an end consumer perspective is fantastic. I've seen so many lines being launched over the years. And luckily enough, because I've been around long enough, people actually would like to hear what my opinion is. And so, if they're really smart, they will talk to key people in the industry and say, here's what we're producing. Now give us some feedback, right?
How important is it to love for your future success in retail? How important is it to really love what you sell? If I'm talking high end, okay, high end retailers, yeah.
I think it's critical. I could not be an optician and be working in a 2 for $99 store. Okay, mm-hmm. I don't care how much money I made; it would cripple me. I have to have a love for the product. I like to think that if you came into my store, I could tell you at least 3 fabulous things about every brand that I have, because I've chosen them based on the fact that they offer something really unique.
So how do you do that? So then how do you then going back to Stanton's again in that store, is you understood the quality of the cream puffs, all right, and what you were saying, whatever. So here you're the one working a lot of hours, I would think. You were the person at the front desk when people walked in. You greeted people. You showed them the products, and all that excitement came through, which would make you extraordinarily successful. But how do you then get that first really good employee?
I already had that first really good employee, and he is with me today.
That Bob?
That's Bob.
Well, how did you find? Give me the Bob story, because I love Bob. Okay, I love Bob, and I love Brandon. Is that his name? Brandon. Yeah. These are people you've had forever. So
Yep.
tell me the Bob story.
Okay, so we were in Peachtree Center. This was before we opened up Phipps, but Phipps was in the pipeline. Okay, or it was out there. It was being discussed, and so this was 1991. And Bob had worked for Eastern Airlines, which had gone bust.
Yeah.
And so he had to go back to school, and he was going to go into the engineering program. But every day he passed the ophthalmic dispensing classroom. And he got friendly with the teacher, and he was like, I think this sounds more interesting than my engineering program. So he switched. And so he came out as a graduate from the DeKalb Tech program in dispensing opticianry.
Okay.
And we were actually his first job. So Bob,
I mean, he just walked into your store?
he applied for a position. We, back then, we knew a lot of people in the industry, just like we do today, who run ophthalmic labs and that kind of stuff. And when they're in the DeKalb Tech program, they have them placed so they can get little bits of experience throughout the industry. And I think somebody in one of the labs called and said, hey, there's this guy who's coming out of school looking for work. He seems like a really good guy. He's a mature student because he was in his 30s at that point. And so he said, would you like to talk to him? And so when we talked to Bob, he was interviewing us much more than we were interviewing him. And because back then, everything was going big bucks, right? So again, he'd have to go work in a superstore and run a superstore or whatever. And I think the small aspect of our business appealed to him. I think not being a big box operator had much more allure. And he chose to come on with us.
What kind of, you say he interviewed you, when you say us, you mean you and your husband?
Yeah.
So what kind of questions was he asking that made you draw closer to him or, put you sort of on edge a bit?
Well, look, we have an industry that is non-standardized. And what I mean by that is some of us are really good opticians. Some of us call ourselves opticians, but are really not opticians. That they may have been fitting shoes 2 weeks ago and they're now fitting you in your eyewear. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a problem with our industry. And it was really important to Bob, having dedicated 2 years, that he come out and work somewhere that felt that the opticianry part of it was critical. We're not just here to sell frames. We're not just here to move product. This is about the people, and it's about doing the absolute best job that can be done. And that has been our benchmark all along. I'm a 150% person. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to give it 150%. Otherwise, I just don't do it. And so, Bob, that kind of resonated with Bob. And I think he kind of, as he says, I found my happy place.
So what you told him, basically, you satisfied his need. You're saying that we want only excellent expert opticians. We want the best of the best. Yes. And I could tell you, I remember this is something that happened recently. So here, Bob was with you for over 30 years when this happened, but I just decided I wanted some reading glasses for when I lay in bed. I don't need reading glasses to read, but it was just makes it a little easier. He took such care in going through my prescription because of whatever weirdness I have. And those are the best lenses, I ever, and it was just something simple. He could have just kind of done it to do it, right? You don't need these, just buy whatever, from the drugstore or whatever. But they're just fabulous. I just was so admired him and was impressed by him, by how careful he was to make sure it was just right for me. And that's so I experienced that expert side. And whenever I get lenses from you guys, they're all like that. It's always right. And if it's not, you fix it, but it's always right. I mean,
anybody, we've got humans involved, so things can go wrong.
Yeah.
But
So that was your first employee.
that
So,
was our
but here
first.
you are. Here's the other side of this. So he could be an expert optician. So he's that engineering side or expert side, I call it. How about that other side? Connecting to people who are high-end buyers and the expectations that they have. There's this customer service side. There's also the piece that I love this inventory. You see, he didn't get that in 2 years of training before he came to you. So how do you develop that? How did that happen?
He was kind of in it when the business was turning, right?
Okay.
So 91 was when the business was really starting to turn and product was changing, and we were much more involved in being able to pick and choose what we wanted because there was more options. And I think a lot of that, resonated with him too. I don't think Bob has ever really looked at it as much from the fashion end
Right.
of it as much as function.
Yeah, that's just not
Right.
Bob. I know.
Right? I mean, he wears a white button-down shirt every day of the world. So,
But I bet you
yeah.
Brandon, the other employee, he has the fashion sense.
Brandon can connect with people quicker, faster than almost anybody I've ever witnessed. He has great fashion sense, and Brandon will, if we don't have something that somebody wants, he'll make sure he finds a way to get it.
So tell me how then Brandon came on board, and how long ago was that?
So Brandon's been with me now for 17 years. And he was a young man. He wasn't married. I think he was 19 when he came on.
Huh.
No, early 20s, maybe. Early 20s.
Okay.
And he was working for a optical department in a warehouse setting, let's say that.
Okay.
Totally disillusioned with it, but loved the feel of it, right? Loved the feel of what it could be, but realized that there's no growth here. This is not what I want to be within this industry. And so he interviewed with us, and I liked his attitude. He was a little cocky. I tell him that all the time. We had to knock a little bit of Brandon out of him, as I like to say. But he was just really genuine and really a fabulous people person. And I knew that on the back end, I could develop him and develop his optician skills because he was so strong up front. So we kind of, in building.
What does that mean he was so strong up front? What do you mean?
Up front with people.
Oh, his interpersonal skills were so strong.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And he loved,
and then,
and you saw that he loved the business, the optical business.
Yeah, we just had to develop him as an optician. He had not had the background that he needed. And so, luckily, again, we are in an apprentice state. And so I have an apprentice on staff at all times because I want to keep the industry moving, and I want to keep the industry moving in a really good way.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine with an apprenticeship program, if you've got somebody apprenticing under someone that's not that great, they're going to be not that great.
So Brandon apprenticed under you and Bob.
Correct.
Probably mostly Bob, I would think.
A little bit of both. I think we kind of divided and conquered. Yeah.
Well, he had two really, really great teachers in that regard. So what?
And he's a top-notch optician. He really is.
Yeah. I agree with that. So how do you, but when you're starting this business and you're trying to get it out of the ground, you must have had, well, let me stick with Bob and Brandon for just a moment. Why did they stay so long? I mean, this is retail. I thought retail had like a ridiculous turnover, even in optical, or am I wrong? In optical, there isn't turnover.
No, there is. We don't like to think of it as retail, but the obvious fact is it is because we're in a mall. Yeah. We have such a medical basis to what we do that we have to wear both hats, right?
Okay.
And so I think we appeal to non-retail people because it's more of a career path. I just worked really hard on setting an environment whereby, even though I made the general rules for the business, right? The foresight into it, the where we're going to go this year is me driven, but they are empowered within that to build it. And I encourage all of my staff to operate as if this is their own business within my business. So, how do they get people coming back and asking for them? How do they build their own client base? Because they're commissioned as well. And so, how does a staff member build their clientele where people are sending them people? And they become repeat, and they want to see that person, and that's always been the drive.
And
And
it
I'm
is. That's funny because the reason I do before I go down there, I usually say, "Is Bob working today?" Isn't that funny? You know,
yeah.
that is really something. So then, as you're building this business, how did it all? So it's you and your husband. You bring in Bob. Okay. Brandon came really much later.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did everybody turn? I didn't see a lot of when I've been going there for so many years. I saw Bob all the time. I didn't see it. I saw some other people. They've come and go and all. What makes people? What made those? What made for that turnover? And how did it continue to work out with you and your husband owning the business and all that? How does all that?
Well, gosh, look, we had turnover in staff just like anybody. Some because we get them in and we realize that there's no amount of training that is going to make them the person we need them to be, and so we just
Right.
we end it right there, because that's more dangerous to my business than me just saying, oh, but they're showing up for work every day. And then we tended, because we're a small business, when we did recruit talent, sometimes it's a challenge to keep them because they want to become a manager, or they have higher aspirations that I just couldn't
Okay.
service them with. How many managers can you have in 2 stores? So our as we started our expansion over, and we ended up with 4 stores, that became a little easier. But the challenge from that aspect of it was that we actually diluted what made us great. We diluted our strength, right?
Yeah,
And so
growth works against you. Absolutely, yeah.
it did against me, yes.
Well, it would.
And
It does.
then,
I've heard this story before because it's hard to duplicate the form. It's like I heard a story about a restaurant that we used to go to. We had a place down in Hilton Head in Sea Pines, and there was a very well-known restaurant there. And the restaurateur was phenomenal, and you just loved going there. And then his brother convinced him to expand. And it was the expansion that killed him. It didn't work in the new location, and the old location started to go to pot, and people stopped going there. So it's very difficult when you have these personal business, I mean, it's your heart and soul that's making it a success. So yeah, I didn't know you got to 4 stores.
yeah, so we had the original Peachtree Center. We opened Phipps. We opened in Lenox. And then we opened one on Wynwood Parkway.
Oh, okay.
And Lenox was a nightmare. I mean, we all know what goes on in Lenox today. I felt the same way 15 years ago.
I think you told me there was such a tremendous loss there. What was it? What do you call that when people are shoplifting?
Oh, I mean, we had to hire more people just to watch people, not to sell. It was not an enjoyable environment. They weren't really the shoppers. There was a lot of browsers, and so it requires more staff just to watch people. It was not the same feel. The Alpharetta store we opened based on some promises that never came to fruition because of the landlord there. And
Did the landlord
then
promise high-end buyers? Is that what the landlord promised?
they promised certain clients. Turns out that those clients did not come in. Probably my bad that I didn't see the
Yeah.
signed, but you're in these conversations, and a friend of ours who owned a well-known restaurant in Buckhead had opened up out there, and they were the anchor. And so I had some insight there into what they were doing and
Yes.
felt that it would be a good pull. This was so many years ago. Wynwood Parkway is so much different today. And then the DOT closed the exit off 400 for, I want to say 4, 5, 6 months, right? So that was unfortunate. And the other thing was when people would come into to my store in Buckhead and they would be giving me their address and it would come up with an Alpharetta address, I would say to them, now, we have a store in Alpharetta. And they would say, oh yeah, but we love to come to Buckhead. And I was like, now, if only I'd done the research on that first.
So the Lenox store didn't make it, right? You closed that, then you closed the Wynwood store.
Yes, we closed the Wynwood.
And what about the other store in Peachtree Center?
We would have kept that open other than the fact that Peachtree Center changed. That was kind of out of our control. A lot of the people that we served in that store were attorneys and accountants, and all the office buildings upstairs were all professional offices. And that had all kind of shifted and moved towards Midtown. And so what was upstairs now was government offices, and they weren't our customer.
Yeah. Because you changed the Peachtree Center store to be high end too, right?
Higher, yes.
Higher end. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So you wound up in the end with the one location.
Yeah, it was a conscious decision not to.
How much between the Lenox Square store and the store up in Alpharetta? Okay, how much do you think that cost you in total? Not to bring up some bad memories.
$250,000.
Yeah, because I just say that because it just gives people an idea. This is what you're risking when you expand. Okay.
Well,
and we all do that. Okay. And when it works, it's great. But when it doesn't, you do pay a price. But the upside on it is still greater than the $250,000 value.
It is. And we had a little bit of luck along the way in that before we opened at Lenox, we actually signed a lease down where now the Shops of Buckhead is.
Okay.
Right. So before all that changed, we were approached by a customer of ours who owned property down there, and he said, you should come and open up a store here. And we were in it. We had signed the lease, and we're about to start the development of the project. And he came to us and said, hey, I've been approached by this Italian gelato company, and they want your space. And I said, but it's our space. We already signed on it. I don't understand. And he said, no. They want this space so bad, they're willing to pay you money to go away. And I said, well, how much are they willing to pay us? And he said, $75,000. And I said, and you'll let me out of the lease? And he said, Wendy, you're a good friend of mine. Of course, if it's better for you, take the money and go. And so we took the $75,000.
Well, there you go.
And we opened up Lenox. So Lenox wasn't as expensive as it could have been, right? Because we offset it.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. So then, now what about this part about being a husband and wife in business? How does that progress? I always I see that from time to time in the technology sector. Okay, and I see the difficulties with it. It's easy to start that way. And because you got two people, you trust each other, both completely bought into the thing. But then life sort of develops beyond that, right?
Yeah.
You get a little older, you have different interests a little bit. Your kids are growing up. It's more complex there versus, oh yeah, we're married, we're also on this, it's all great. How does that progress? How did that?
Well, ended up in divorce for me.
Oh, okay.
But not just because of the business. I mean, I think, as you say, sometimes you go off in different paths. I was very much behind the business and the developing and wanting it, to take Phipps to the next level. And he really wasn't that interested in it. So for a period of time, he kind of stepped back from the business anyway.
I see.
So it was very logical when we did end up splitting up.
Well, when he steps back from the business, he was an optometrist, right?
Optician.
Optician is what I meant. Okay, optician is where does he go? When you say he
Well,
steps back?
he didn't do anything. He was actually running the Lenox location once we had Lenox up.
I see. Okay.
And so he went over there, and so we weren't working together daily. I did all the administration and the business aspects of the business anyway. He was in Lenox, and towards the end of it, he was kind of working part-time there anyway. And so it was just a decision that when we closed Lenox, that, I really didn't need him to come over to Phipps. Phipps was a well-oiled machine at that point.
Yeah, but what you're telling me, though, is he lost his love for the business.
Yeah.
I never felt that with you. But that happens. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It just happens sometimes. You just go like, I kind of had enough of this. That's why a lot of people just sort of sell, like you say, it's just time for me to get out and do something else,
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that's a fair statement. And I think, when we did come to separate, obviously you have to have the uncomfortable conversations of, well, what do you do with the business, right?
Yeah.
And his point was, if you don't want it, I will sell it.
Ah, there you go. So that's what I'm talking about. So you said, but I do want it.
But I do want it.
So then you got this other issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Half of it's mine, right? How do you deal with, how do you wind up dealing with that difficult issue in a family-owned business?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think the business had a certain value prior to me joining it, which we were able to establish.
I see.
In all fairness, that was his. We had the big house in Buckhead that everybody thinks they want. You take the house, I take the business, and that's essentially what it kind of came down to as we did an evaluation.
Okay, but you were able to work it out, and it did work out. So then you wound up owning the 100% of the business. And
yes.
How long ago was that?
2007.
Okay. So you also had children.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have? Did you say you had?
I have a 28-year-old and a 26-year-old daughter.
Okay. They must have worked in the business at some point.
Well, they used to come in when they were kids and wash all the mirrors for me and that kind of thing. And I always had conversations with them as they got older. Do you have an ambition to come in and do it? My eldest one, I actually tried to talk her into going to optometry school because she had more of a science bent. And I'm like, come on, and she's like, Mom, I do not want to work for you. I do not want to. Okay, fine. And so she goes off and does her own thing.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, today she is an apprentice optician in the store.
In your store?
Yes, she is. And so she came in, she was going to go to PA school, and she was working for an orthopedic surgeon to get her hours to go to PA school.
Yeah.
Started having some health issues, and she needed to cut back. And I said, why don't you come work for me? Flexible hours, do what you need to do until we get you on the right path. And so she came, and she's a little bit like me, which is probably why we butt heads sometimes. But she started taking over things in the office. And the staff, Bob and Brandon, came to me and said, wow, she's really good. Like, can we keep her? And so we started having the conversations again. Nicola, is this something you think you would like to do? And finally she said, I think it really is. Now, I had a dilemma at this point because I was already talking to people to sell my business.
Right. That's where I was going. Okay, good. All right. So how do you deal with the dilemma? Now, these are people who, by the way, you talked about early on when we first started about testing the water just to see what the process was like. So you put yourself up for sale in that sense, okay, even though your intention was not to sell, but to get information. Now you had somebody they probably approached you. Is that what happened?
Well, they initially, even when I went through the test, they approached me.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yes. I've never positioned the business for sale.
I see.
Because this is too small an industry and, a little bit of blood in the
that's good.
kind of thing. And so when the opportunity came to me, I actually went through the exercise with two different companies to see how these two different people valued the business, knowing that I, would not be willing to sell. But it was a fantastic exercise. But when it pertains to my daughter, I had said to her, look, I don't want you to think that you're coming into this business so that you can take it over, because I don't believe in that, right? If I get a sale for this business and it's something I cannot turn down, I will be making that decision. Doesn't mean I can't help you set up a business.
Well, why did you say I don't believe in that? Why don't you believe in that? Most family owners believe in that. That's odd for you to come down so hard on it.
I don't know one optician or optometrist that has left it to the next generation that has done any service to the business. So
okay.
it's from my own personal history.
So the business was important to the
Yes.
point you wanted to make sure it continued to be a premier retail optician. Okay. And that's threatened by a family taking over. That's true, I think, in anything, because it's just doesn't have the soul of the founder, kind of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And not that she wouldn't have done
Well, then what happened? So somebody approached you again.
Yeah. So it was during the pandemic. We closed down March 17th and just closed. And a friend of mine who had sold to a group from Canada, he has 12 stores in Florida. And he called me and said, are you interested in selling? And I said, well, probably not a great time to sell a business when you're shut. And he said, no, look, he said, these guys, they're not looking for a fire sale, right? That's not the way they're doing it. They're using this downtime to source where they want to go, which I thought was quite smart.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm always willing to talk. And so I went through the motion with these people, and good company. And we actually came to terms. And they let their exclusivity agreement run out because I went back and asked for more money when I saw what my sales were in 2020. Okay, so 2020 was an enormous year for us. And so I went to them and I said, I have based this deal on where I was up to now. And you did penalize me for being closed and lost revenue first part of 2020, but I need more money. And so they said, well, we don't disagree, but we'd like to watch it for another 6 months.
Okay.
So the exclusivity ran out. A friend of mine who was heading up a group based on the West Coast came to me and said, will you talk to us? And I said, oh my gosh, okay, fine. I already had all my numbers pulled together, so it wouldn't have been as hard work. And I said, I don't think you understand my business, so I'm just going to tell you up front that I don't think it would be a good fit. Because I knew what they'd previously been buying. But again, I went through it because it's a good exercise. And that one I turned down. So I had the first company that was still on hold I could go back to if I wanted to. A third company came to me and said, before we hear that there are rumblings out there, and before you make a decision, we would love to talk to you. And so the CEO flew down to Atlanta and we had lunch. And he impressed me within, the 2 hours that we sat talking together. And I felt that this company had more of an idea of direction than the first one. And so I said, fine, let's start talking.
Yeah, but they also understood you better and your business better is what probably what gave you that comfort. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. It wasn't just an acquisition. There was a strategy behind their acquisition. They could tell me the why that they wanted my business.
What was the strategy that impressed you?
To become the premier luxury eyewear group in the US. They already had a foundation in that.
Retail.
in retail.
I see.
They already had a foundation. I knew, I had known of the company for many years. They also had a wholesale aspect to the company, and I had actually purchased frames from them
Okay.
over years. So I had a little more knowledge with them, where the first group had some luxury, mostly in Canada, and then the group in Florida. But then they had a large mid-price chain, and then they had a large lower price chain, and they were actually publicly traded. And so I just didn't get a sense that they had the same luxury direction.
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
I think they'd be pulled in too
When
many
you
different
got
ways.
closer to, the term sheet comes in, okay? And you're sitting with the term sheet, and it's the terms you agreed to. There's no surprises in it. And it has a space for your signature. Okay. What were you thinking? What was the battle in your mind that went on that said, man, this is the moment. 34 years and 9 months. All of my life is in this thing. This is the moment. Pen in hand. What were you thinking?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many things that go through. One, am I doing a disservice to my daughter by not, continuing this with something that she can take over? And then I looked at it from a perspective of, well, how silly. With the amount of money I'm getting, I could give her X number of dollars and she could go set herself up.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, I'm 55. Am I too young to be doing this? I've got some life left in me, and then the other side of it is, I'm always a goal setter, and so I've always set myself goal after goal after goal, and I'm thinking to myself, have I met my goals? Have I really have I maxed this out to the point that I'm saying, okay, I just can't do this any better, so now I want to cash out. And that was the biggest point for me. And so when I was negotiating with them, I had to have a financial tie-in for a period of time after I sold, because I got to have those goals. And I wanted to know that when I truly reached that pinnacle and I became the largest grossing independent eyewear store in the country,
wow,
that it would be me that had done it.
Huh.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. And you achieved that.
Yes, I did.
Congratulations. That is phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
that was my goal, right? That was
that's the big goal.
I got to reach my goal, financially be rewarded for it, but have the satisfaction that I got it. And it was almost when I got to that, I could almost take a deep breath and went, I did it.
There's that old term, what is it, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal? Well, you certainly seem to have achieved that for sure. That is really fantastic. Man, I'm proud of you. And I'm proud of being a customer and to be a part of that whole thing, but it is, that's pretty exciting. That's all I could say. And I'm sure your daughter was excited for you.
Oh,
even in the midst of
absolutely.
Yes. Got to be proud of mom. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And I think, coming from a family that has split up and where the business was, and, now dad's out of it and that kind of stuff. It was a little difficult because quite honestly, once he was out of it, I was able to make decisions that I had been held back on previously. And so the business went
because
from
he was
here to
more
here.
Conservative than you were?
More conservative. We were still on major decisions, having to have co-approval, if you will.
I see, yeah.
And so, that was a struggle because I always had a very strong vision of how we're going to get to the next goal. And so I think it was maybe a little disconcerting for the kids initially when they could see that the business was going from here to here all of a sudden. But I think as they've gotten older and they've matured, they can give me credit for it.
It's interesting, though, those being together, you were on the same page kind of going into the business. But what happened is, you kept you had a real vision, and it never stayed as a shared vision. So what your vision, you're getting more and more bought in, more and more excited about the business. And if I'm here, then how do you do it? If I'm here, if I'm below, then I'm not as excited about the business. And if I'm not excited about the business, I am just generally more conservative about it. I don't want to do. So there's this mismatch, and that's how you wind up with. You either give into it and sell because that's all you can do, and start something new, or you say no. You need to kind of go away because I love it too much. Let me just run with it, and I'll give up pretty much whatever's fair, maybe even what's unfair, to to kind of take it forward, because it's what I want. I see it, and that's I think that's a pretty good analysis of what you've kind of went through. But then you wind up with, okay, so I've achieved this big goal that I never thought was even possible, and here I am, and now I'm going to work for somebody else. Usually, the people that buy usually are like, we'll never see her after 3 months, but you've been with them for a little bit, this new buyer. You like their strategy, I know that, but finding a position for someone that's been a solo owner, practitioner, tell me about that transition and how that's worked out for you.
Look, I'm not going to say that it was a super easy transition, because when you're a decision maker, I would get up in the morning, I look myself in the mirror. Hey, Wendy, does that seem like a good idea? Yeah, Wendy, it sounds great. Let's do it.
Well, more importantly, it's your vision. This isn't your vision anymore. It's not your company.
No, okay. It's not. But even when it is my vision, or if it's my strategy, having to run it through 2 or 3 people is, I'm a type A. So I'm like, okay, how long is this going to take? So there's that part of it. But it's been a good fit. I now do the merchandising for the entire group. And as we acquire more locations that are similar locations to me, I'm a good sounding board for these people coming in, right? And we just acquired a group in DC who was a good friend of mine. Have the utmost respect for him, and so now we're working together.
It's a small industry in that regard. Everybody does know each other. Did you hear me?
No, you froze. Sorry, Charlie.
I said it's a small, which proves it's a small industry that everybody does know each other. Still can't hear me?
Nope, I'm sorry.
I wonder why you can't hear me.
My web.
All
Try
right.
it again.
I said, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I said it's a small industry. When you talked about Washington, you knew those people. It's a small industry. Everybody does know each other.
Especially in our end of the industry.
The high-end retailers, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
We know each other. It's.
Well, you go to all the shows and you're all hanging around with the high-end booths, right? That have all that, right? Yeah.
That's the good end of our industry too. Yeah. We work with peers all over, and
so you're saying that you were talking about, though, is you're helping them. You're enjoying your work because you're still meeting, not maybe in hotel rooms to meet those high-end manufacturers, okay, but vendors, but you're meeting with them, which you enjoy them, okay, and doing that merchandising because you have still a love for high-end eyeglasses, okay, and those products. And then now you have this other piece, which is to represent them and connecting them with some of your friends and talking about how it's kind of worked out and what the steps might be for them to exit their business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fit. I made a good choice. I'm comfortable with my decision.
Yeah.
And for however many years I have left in this industry,
it's good.
I'm enjoying it. And sometimes change is good, right? I think sometimes it gives you a little more enthusiasm. It's the same thing that I used to feel when I would go to trade shows. I would dread going to the trade shows. But after 3 days with my peers and seeing new product and their struggles, their successes, you kind of come back recharged and ready to hit it again.
Yeah, right.
And so, it's nice. I'm enjoying it.
I remember always walking, and when I used to go to trade shows for my industries and stuff, I'd walk out with two feelings. One is, I'm not the worst. I'm like, I'm pretty smart, and I'm competitive. It's a good thing. But man, these guys seem to be like they're killing it. I wonder if I could catch them. So it kind of gives you that new breath of motivation, if you will. That new competitiveness, but a good piece of confidence that you didn't have before. Plus, you enjoy the people that you're working with. That you're in the industry with, if you will, and which makes you feel like, yeah, I am in the right place. This is a good thing. So you've dedicated your life to this industry, and you've certainly contributed greatly to it, moving into this high end. But you must have a tremendous reputation with these high end vendors. Everybody must know Wendy Salle.
What's funny is you don't see that, but I remember the CEO of the company that I sold to. He came to me and he said, "I've done my homework on you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "You are extremely well respected. You are extremely well known." He said, "Everybody knows you." And I was kind of like, yeah, but I've been doing this for 34 years, so of course they know me, right? I've been around. I'm a dinosaur. But no, look, there's a lot to it. I've been successful for a long period of time, and I've watched a lot of people come up in this industry, and I've given them a lot of help. I always make myself available to anybody that is opening stores, and I meet these people where they may be working with other people at one point, and they'll say to me, "Wendy, I'm opening my own store. Can I run a few things by you?"
Yeah.
And I am always open. Always.
What do you think? You have been very successful, and you do have a great reputation. What do you think what are those elements that made you successful as you look back? There's never like 10. It's usually like these three things that really made it all work as I look back.
Gosh, I'm tenacious. I don't give up easily. I'm a good people person in general. I read people very well.
But
and I've never been,
yeah.
And I've never been afraid of hard work, ever. People used to say, "Oh, it must be great owning your own business. You can set your own schedule and, take time off whenever you want." And I'm like, are you serious? I mean, this is a top-down thing. I work more than any of my staff. And I really believe you set the tone. And I've always done that.
Lee Iacocca. You remember Lee Iacocca? Do you remember that name, or you don't know that name? He was the inventor.
I do.
He was the manager in charge of when the Mustang was invented. Okay, back in the '62 or '63, and he then took over Chrysler, right? With and got the government to loan money to Chrysler. That was the first government guaranteed loans. And I wrote his book. He was a fellow Italian, and he was so famous and everything. And I remember reading his book, and the name of the book was Iacocca. And he made that statement. That's the only thing I took away from that book was this one line. And I was a general manager of a technology company at the time. And he said, "The speed of the boss is the speed of the team." Did you hear me?
Say that again.
The speed of the boss is the speed of the team. Still can't hear it? The speed of the boss is the speed of the team. And that's what you're saying.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And I see it all the time. You can't be this absentee owner expecting everybody to work well and to maintain high quality and everything. You got to be there. You got to set the pace, and everybody will kind of keep the pace with you. And every once in a while, you get somebody who passes you, and you go like, "Oh, that's the next person to kind of make this thing go." It's it is. It's really interesting to do that. But the other thing that you have, the other thing that you have is you just have such tremendous confidence. I could just feel it from you.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, that you are great with people and all that, but I never felt a sense of anxiousness or worry or ever from you and all. It's sort of like, yeah, this is going to work. I got good customers. I got great products. I got a nice location. I've got great people I'm working with. I mean, this is great. You know, I mean, that was something that you had. And optimism, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe I just hide it well.
Maybe. It was really great.
Look,
This is good.
I mean, there's always times when you doubt yourself, right? You question yourself, but those times for me have been very few and far between. And I feel, very lucky to have gotten to the point that I have with my business. It's always been a very personal goal, not just about the money. It's so much more about what I've built, right?
Yeah.
And taking pride in it, because I have invested my entire work life in it.
Think back. Give me one last question I have is to give me an analysis. This is for female entrepreneurs, okay? Give me an analysis of where you were when you grew up and the opportunities, where you were when you graduated for college, and where you are. No, forget that. Where you were when you kind of got out of college. Let's start there because it's more personal for you. Where you were when you were out of college and the opportunities for females then. Where you were when you finally started Salle Opticians, and then where you are now. So those are three sort of different environments that female entrepreneurs, to see where it all came from. You've covered those 3 decades. I think it would be interesting to female entrepreneurs, to hear your analysis there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know that I ever thought that I was at a disadvantage because I was a female. I've never operated from a female brain. I recognized when I was younger that, for example, when I went to A-level college right after high school in England, you do 2 years of study before you go on to university. And all the girls took typing courses. And I remember thinking to myself, now this was before computers, right? So it was like I need typing for computers.
Because you'll become a secretary. I mean, that's what it's about. Yeah.
And it really kind of irritated me. Actually, it irritated me. But I did it, and I'm like, okay, we move on. But so I never really thought about myself as being disadvantaged.
That must mean you never experienced it either.
No, but look, I've been doing it for myself. So, yes, the one company that I worked for in England was a little, they're women, they're part-timers, they've got kids, just put them in a uniform and just have them do a little bit, okay? It was a male-dominated company at the top, and you didn't see anybody with any authority until a management level on a store. So yeah, if I look back, there was that, but it never ever has clouded what I've done or how I've moved forward.
How about when you were negotiating that lease with Phipps? It wasn't your husband negotiating with it. You were negotiating with Phipps. How did they treat you? Did they see you as a female, or did they just see you as a business person they were negotiating a lease with?
I think they saw me as just a business person. I can tell you that when I had to renegotiate my lease after 10 years, the leasing agent at that point was a female. And she said to me, "You have a bit of a reputation." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yes." She said, you're known to be no nonsense. Right? And I said, "So is that a good thing? Because, women can be given the B word, right? If you're a man, you're a really good negotiator. But if you're a woman, you're a whatever."
Yeah, right.
And she said, "No." She said, "I think it's fantastic." fantastic. But that was coming from another woman. But again, I could care less what anybody thought. I've always known that I'm a reasonable person, and I'm not asking for anything more than anybody else would. And
So
so,
you didn't go
you
in.
know,
So that's the
that's
other
how I've
part of
always
this. I
operated.
think it's important is you don't go into something thinking that you're going to be discriminated against. And even if you might be, you don't see it because it doesn't even make sense to you. So you just kind of go straight through it. You can think of me maybe that way,
Yeah,
but I don't even think about you thinking about me that way. That's my point. Then you get into now, you
yeah.
think about starting a business now, like if it's your daughter or whatever, she's going to start her own business. How much has the environment changed for women entrepreneurs now?
Oh, tremendously. I think in our industry, especially, our industry is dominated by women. Optometry is dominated by women.
Wow.
It's very interesting. Within the last 10 years, huge shift. Look, I think women have talents that men don't.
Yeah.
I think we're highly intuitive. My husband, my new husband, likes to say, women rule the world, men just don't know it yet. And,
But
but he's surrounded by women, so he
I'm going
has
to
to
leave you
say
with
that.
this, though. You couldn't have done it without Bob, okay?
Absolutely.
I love
He is
that.
he's what I call my work husband.
Yeah, there you go. I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Well, Wendy, this has been fabulous. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know you're up in New York and you're in the offices there and you got work to do and people to see, but I can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I have enjoyed it. You're always one of my favorites anyway, so this has been a pleasure.
All right, I'll close this out and then I'll say goodbye to you, okay? Thanks for
Okay.
attending the Charlie Paparelli Show. This was one of my favorite interviews, and I'm sure you'll pick up a lot from this on how to be successful as an entrepreneur. And I hope these females are actually watching this because Wendy was there when. So take care, and please sign up at paparelli.com, and we'll see you next time.